Welcome to the Potboiler. I'm Patrick Hughes, and this is The Hero Business, Part 1. Potboiler is an old term for pulpy paperback genre writing that I want to exploit in all the right ways. Let's do the intro. Who is your hero? Who comes through the dark of your nightmare to defend you from your worst fear? When that image appears in your mind's eye, what qualities define what you see? Is your hero the kind of idol we've all grown to know? Impressive by every physical standard, instantly worthy of your trust and your favor? Is your hero a statue, a movie poster, a legend? What if the figure that emerged through the shadows and the smoke with an outstretched hand was not impressive to you in any popular measure? He doesn't look like your hero. He's humble, average, and forgettable in every superficial way. He can do things no one else can do, but has spent his life told that he's unexceptional. He's never been considered super. He just wants to help. The episodes of this story will be offered with no embedded commercial interruption. Please visit patrickhughes.ca for links to me and my other projects. And please stick around after this part of the story for some very light business. Enjoy. Let's play the music. The Hero Business, Part 1. An Introduction to Heroism by Ethan E. Edwards. I saw a movie the other day. It was about this selfless, superpowered hero that overcomes seemingly insurmountable internal and external odds to ultimately defeat evil and show the world the greatness of his greater good. Familiar but fantastic in its popcorn magnificence. It was a sequel to a previous film I recently saw on my favorite video app. That video was in a section titled Fantasy. Though the movie gods had classified it as such, due to the nature surrounding the hero's attributes, I couldn't take my eyes off of the flashy word that hung over my hero as though a word bubble from his former comic book medium had captured my thoughts exactly. Epiphany, truth, and irony seemed to show up in the strangest temples of modern worship. Do they not? Why do heroes only show up in our fantasy? Our world is made up of heroes, villains, and victims. The word has a fickle and fashionable way of distinguishing one from another and blurring the lines that separate them. Our modern life is defined by the titles and labels attributed to each, by us and for us, by the opinion that surrounds us. Contemporary heroes have a subjective appeal rather than universal qualities deemed divine by the masses. One person's devil is another one's savior. We choose our heroes based on the identities we choose for ourselves, rather than identifying with altruistic or admirable heroic qualities. Does anyone really know the hero anymore? Can there even be such a thing? The hero has two incarnations in our collective consciousness, the martyr and the superstar. He or she is the subject of immediate worship or posthumously appreciated, the recipient of glory or the selflessly unsung. Rarely do the two share one body. The heroes that we strive to emulate are rarely the ones that intend to strive for us. These two incarnations foster two forms of admiration. Two people that we could want to be. We admire those who accomplish that which we envy, and we manufacture admirations for those who achieve the unenviable. The mantle of hero is placed on those who inherently have something or have attained something that we desire. We applaud the acts of the selfless Samaritan, but we never envy his station. We never crouch at his feet, plead her attention, or pledge in our deepest fantasies to one day give what she has given. We admire that person, not because she was good to us or on behalf of us, but because she was good for us and in spite of us. We admire gains, not goals, and inherent ability rather than virtue. We want people to win, not because of a distant martyrdom, but because we like the way they look, and we stand under the same flag. Our heroes are clean and strong and represent the best of our superficial values. They're the people we point out to our children, creating models for the roles we hope they will one day inhabit. We fondly remember our martyrs and teach our children about what they gave. We canonize them and march in their memory. Our martyrs are treasured for their virtuous lives, but honored only in the past tense. Why can't martyrs be heroes in life? Picture yourself in a desperate situation. Picture yourself at the mercy of your deepest fear. You're lost in an endless maze. You're locked in a cage as rats and snakes slither and scurry over your nimble, naked skin. You hang precariously from some ledge. The gorge below is so deep you can't see the bottom. Your cramping fingers and arms are starting to weaken. You can't save yourself. So who's going to save you? Now picture the person who is going to save you. Whose hand reaches through the darkness? Who pulls you to safety? Assuming this person is a stranger, excluding parents, all your family and friends, what does your hero look like? What attributes define the presence of your hero? Do you see a persona plated in gold? The perfect physical specimen, adorned in vibrant colors and maybe a cape? Do you see a myth? A celebrity? A false idol? What if the hand that saved you belonged to a figure that in no way looked like your hero? Perhaps it's not an image you see, but it's a presence that you feel. Somehow an empathic awareness tells you that this person values your life as much or even more than their own. Something in that person's stare makes you certain he or she seeks no glory and wants nothing in return but the knowledge of your safety. You then find nothing else in this person to attract your worship. No splendor, no commendable moral or philosophical standpoint. Nothing but the deed itself is there to snare your admiration. Could you maintain that starry-eyed awe? How do you thank that person? How do you repay your hero when there's nothing you can offer that he or she will accept? You've seen this person's face on no cereal box and never in association with a multinational shoemaker. You don't know what flag he stands under or where his allegiances lie. Could that person still be your hero? What if this person has never been anyone's hero? What if this person had abilities that no other person had and could do things that no one else could do, but was still never spectacular? Also, what if this person was utterly selfless and simply incapable of putting his needs ahead of others, but was never appreciated for it? What if his only desire was to help others? What if no one had ever believed in him? Maybe he can stop bullets, but he doesn't have the presence or the confidence to attract a second look from those who pass him on the street. What if the things that make him special set him apart and left him alone for his entire life? His special abilities have never once felt like gifts. His life is a series of emotional wounds, being left out and passed over in every chapter. His clothes are drab, his styleless hair is receding, and his physical condition sits kind of loose and untoned over the belt of his pants. He's unimpressive in every possible superficial asset. He can't comprehend fame, media, or the fickle nature of popularity. He's never considered hero mythology, secret identities, supervillains, symbols, colors, or capes. He just wants to help people. How could he be anyone's hero? Is it possible for us to admire someone simply for being virtuous? Is it possible to be celebrated without being a celebrity? Can someone be a hero by simply being heroic? Is there a place for that kind of hero in our society? I believe all great stories are about heroes in one way or another. I wonder sometimes what has become so unheroic. The storytellers or the people they're telling the stories to? I guess I just want a new section on my local video service. Contributing editor, The Daily Sun. Part 1. Stranger. Chapter 1. You know the look the bad guy has on his face when he's at his baddest? When he's got his gun cocked, his situation in hand, and his ill-gotten gains in sight? When he's harnessed all the electricity coursing from his victim's defeated expression and the urban swamp surrounding them, a feral grin rises up his face and he knows the world could crumble within his closing fist? He's the villain, and he'll prevail in the moment to follow. Roy was in that moment. He had that look. His ravenous smile reflected the street lamp ambiance and a twisted, star-shaped twinkle of light at the end of his gun barrel. Roy was the bad guy. Roy was comfortable in his place as the adversary. An outlaw sees the wrong in his actions as justified as a virtue of self-preservation. An outlaw sees his victims as guilty of poor judgment and bad luck. He rides in the night. He lives by his code. He takes no prisoners. He robs from the rich and gives to himself. He fears a fair fight. He preys on the good-natured. He disrespects life. Roy abused life. Life would soon return the favor. Roy's work, or his finds, as he called them, were most fitting under the shroud of night. Under the flickering streetlights, a flood-lit billboard brandishing a car he'd never own, and a haze of dank and distant screeches, he felt nocturnal and placed enviably on the food chain. Immediate and infinite power over another was briefly his during his moments. A refreshing numbness from a life of otherwise tinted in underachievement. His goal wasn't to hurt people exactly, though he did enjoy the rush of violating somebody. It was that hopeless look of surrender when a victim relinquishes their valuables that, sometimes of immeasurable worth, was kind of an addictive feeling of supremacy for someone with so little to be proud of. Though some inherent instinct, he knew these tricks that made his presence, his interaction during an encounter, more effective. He knew how to present the facts to his hapless subjects. He made his intentions clear, and he kept their options hazy. Roy's method had a set of rules. No theatrics. The last thing a petty thief needs is a recognizable style. No credit cards or traceable valuables. The second last thing he needs is to leave a trail. No quick movements or grabbing. This leads to panic. Fear is useful, but panic only slows things down. Don't make it personal. People are more likely to fight back in the face of an insult. And finally, no standoffs. Roy knew his place was as an outlaw, not a cowboy. His rules had served him well over the tenure of his short career. At 21 and over 7 years in the fray, he had yet to be convicted on a felony charge. This badge perched itself somewhere at the top of his most cherished accomplishments, somewhere around the loss of his virginity. Across the street and down about a block, an elderly woman hunched her way across the circles of light from the street lamps. She was walking alone, returning from getting milk she wished she didn't have to get. She scurried up the street toward him without getting anywhere that quickly. She would be Roy's first lamb of the evening. Her head was positioned downward so she could see where she was going while avoiding all eye contact. She saw Roy coming, though she didn't want to. Step over there. Roy was a master of the approach. He always did it slow. He made sure the victim saw him coming. Pouncing leads to screaming. He was also careful never to grab, but to order with his best impersonation of his authoritarian father to step aside with them, again to avoid screaming and panic. The lady reared in shock, though she wasn't surprised. Her eyes bulged wide as though they were gasping oxygen during the seizure of her anxiety. The eyes were the first payoff of the outlaw rush. You see the gun. Let's not make me have to use it. Keep your mouth shut, and you'll live. Roy brought his face in close to hers, still careful not to touch. He let his stale nicotine halitosis pour onto her face. The lady wept and whimpered an intelligible monologue as she scrambled about for her meager valuables. Whimpering loss of composure was a payoff. Number 2. It can be infinitely pleasurable to hear someone babble pleas they certainly never thought they'd utter. Roy had heard better. Moment of truth. happens the second the thief can see surrender in the eyes of the victim. The moment they decide not to take the risk, but to relinquish their earthly possessions in favor of their irreplaceable ones. The moment they reach for the goods. Deflated old lady let out a long, labored breath and opened her worn old handbag. Roy licked his chops. The third payoff arrives with the booty. It's not the goods themselves, but the anticipation, like an unopened Christmas gift. That immaculate feeling of wonder immediately before beautifully wrapped bows and ribbons are torn asunder. Roy loved wondering what was going to emerge from those purses. As he prepared his face for thankless and evil, his brain spun and scrambled with an expression of contorted disbelief. Who the His expression followed his head as he leaned back slightly, the jolt still moving him through the sight of an unwelcome presence. Without noticing a change in the lady's face, Roy watched an arm slowly drop between them. It was a space that was never before invaded. The novelty of the situation stunned Roy momentarily. Roy's control returned as a torso soon followed the arm. His eyes met the eyes that had destroyed his moment of truth. They weren't the captivating eyes Roy's anger and disbelief had captivated in him. "You should leave now, ma'am," was said to the victim, while the eyes remained attached to Roy's. She made an attempt at gratitude with a nod and a stutter. She quickly turned and scuttled away. This transgression released Roy from his captivation and gave his immediate role a new focus. You just got into one large friggin' problem. To control himself in a situation, Roy had reverted into an autopilot mode, directed by everything his pop culture sensibilities told him to be, fueled by the intimidation he didn't find in the eyes before him. You shouldn't be doing that. The words and the calm demeanor in which they were delivered impressed Roy even less. They did, however, define his role as the antagonist with greater detail. I'm here to stop you. Stop me from what? From hurting people. Oh, yeah? Roy had taken a step back as their words exchanged. The figure before him had yet to instill him with any level of intimidation, except the initial shock of his entrance. Nothing about the man with the bravery to stand in front of his gun was particularly impressive. His shoulders were somewhat narrow beneath a well-worn wool coat. Features Roy could make out were soft and forgettable. He was adorned with no badge and brandished no gun of his own. This was no hero. What if I don't want to be stopped? What if I take the cash from that lady's purse out of your ass? I've got the gun. So I'll worry about who's getting hurt tonight. Roy's discipline had been replaced by bravado. He lowered his gun briefly as he stepped back from the intruder in disgust. Now the gun was back up, setting a new tone for the discussion. It was now that Roy had found that bad guy look. This situation, this guy, his things, his life were Roy's for the taking. The skin between his eyes and his temples wrinkled over his smile. His fangs glittered despite the lack of any light. What do you think of that, hero? No response. Roy was breaking his rules. With the rodent's agility, Roy lunged at his opponent. slightly outsized by the stranger, but felt inflated by the weapon in his hand. He dropped a blow to the stranger's forehead, using the butt of his gun with all the force he had, quickly followed with a second. Roy's eyes widened and blazed with excitement, bloodlust and rage as his blows landed, till an icy shock burst them open wider. Just as Roy envisioned his victory, he felt one hand grip his coat and another wrap around his neck, like cold metal. Roy was thrown to the ground like a rambunctious child. He was thrown with a force that shocked him momentarily. He fumbled for the gun that had landed a couple of feet to his right, while the stranger still calmly stood over him. With victory soon back in his grasp, Roy let out an inaudible nasal giggle and raised the gun at his enemy. He didn't get the pleading payoff. He now saw it as a different kind of outlaw. His fangs reemerged as a feral instinct born in of his urban justice prepared him for his first homicidal act. "Screw you, hero. You're gonna die." The stranger's face remained still and uninspired. Roy pulled the trigger. Shooting the stranger didn't turn out the way Roy thought it would. Shooting a person rarely turns out the way it's supposed to. Though a person may become accustomed to death, homicide never becomes natural to human eyes. Pulling the trigger seemed natural to Roy. The tiny explosion that preceded the bullet was part of what Roy expected, as was the forceful kick that jolted in his hand. He was prepared for that moment of reciprocal emotional shock from a murderous act. But nothing seemed natural after that. Shooting the stranger didn't go as Roy had planned. The bastard didn't fall. Roy's disbelieving gasp formed into a primal scream. A scream and the explosion of his gun shattered the darkness that covered them as he released two more quick shots into the man before him. A fourth, fifth, and sixth soon followed with a scream that escalated from primal into panic. All he could recognize from his landing bullets were the slight twitches in the form of the force of the bullets hitting against the man's torso. Roy's eyes bulged to a new diameter as he saw the slugs from his bullets dropping to the sidewalk. The sound of Roy's panic had reached a whistling pitch as he sharply found it halted as the stranger advanced on him like the creature from an old horror movie. Pitching the empty pistol aside, Roy scrambled and scrambled and scrambled to his unresponsive feet. Just as his foot got his first good hold of some asphalt, the vice-like metallic grip got a hold of his leather coat at the collar. Again, like an unruly child, Roy was manhandled into the nearest alley. "What the hell are you? You ain't got no vest on. I shot you, man. I shot you. How can you still be standing? Those damn bullets just bounced." The sentence trailed off as Roy was thrown into a gritty brick wall and the wind was knocked out of him. One of the jagged bricks caught him above the eye. Roy could feel a single drop of warm blood rolling past his eye down the side of his face, as his mind manly tried to produce for him a bargaining chip. After a couple of squirmings, Roy knew he had no way out. His shoulders dropped as defeat overcame him. "Okay, man, what do you want?" He felt the surrender felt by his victims. "You hurt people. You violate their security. You take their dignity. Roy tried to look into the face of his captor. When he finally gathered the courage to look up, the faint light from the street crept up behind. A silhouette was all Roy could distinguish. "What is your name?" What, man?" "Tell me your name." It was a demand that came in a tone that was calm and loud, without volume or force. Anyone breathing would have obeyed that tone. Roy Bergen." The dark figure in his massive grip thumped Roy's back against the wall, knocking the wind out of his body for a second time. "You're going to stop hurting people. I could hurt you tonight, but I'm not going to. I'm going to watch you instead, Roy. If you try to steal again, I'll be back. I'll come back and make you hate everything you've taken." The voice was still calm. The stranger managed to make his point convincingly without the slightest malice or anger. He spoke as though his threat was truth, pure and simple. Any forceful or threatening demeanor would have merely diminished the effect. It worked on Roy. His breath ran in and out as he prepared his finest repentance, willing to admit whatever he could to garner him freedom. Roy just wanted to go home. He had enough of being an outlaw for tonight. "Do you understand me, Roy?" A whimpering yes barely escaped Roy's weakened expression. The following few seconds of Roy's life passed like pouring molasses, dripping by with a tortuously hanging hesitation. He couldn't endure the suspense, couldn't stand not knowing what the stranger and the darkness of this night had in store for him. Quickly reviewed his place and his life, consciously rolling recent, distant events before his eyes in a way that he knew people in his situation were supposed to. He yearned for the chance to rewind and renew. The old Roy would have been very ashamed. With the final drip of molasses, Roy felt the grip around his neck and chest loosen, and his feet dropped to the ground. "Go home, Roy." His body twitched momentarily, uncertain that the ordeal was over. "And remember, I'll be watching." Roy tried to get a last look at the stranger as he left the alley, but again failed to distinguish any features in the dim, damp light. He knew in the back of his head that he wouldn't remember the face, he'd remember the presence. The stranger emerged from the alley to watch Roy dash down the street into the dark, turning back every few leaps and scuttles to ensure he was not being pursued. The figure at the mouth of the alley crouched down and picked up one of the bullet shells from the slimy pavement, examining it for a moment before dropping it into his coat pocket. His eyes were attracted up to the billboard with the bright red sports car. A gorgeous woman leaning over it looked down at him seductively. He looked back at Roy, still scurrying. A smile crossed his face that was warmer than the gloating ridicule that he was entitled to. It was a warm smile amidst the bleak darkness surrounding him. Roy would never feel the same about being an outlaw. It'd be over a month before he could bring himself to confront anyone in the dark with a gun. Never again could accomplish his thievery with the same confidence and bravado. The payoffs never felt as good. The romance was gone. He looked over his shoulder. Chapter 2. The people of the court settled into the stiff wooden furniture. The court came to order. To the charge of assault and battery on the night of the 16th. How does the defendant plead? The defendant pleads guilty, Your Honor. The prosecution recommends jail time in consideration of the defendant's reoccurring criminal offenses. Thank you, Counselor. I'm fully aware of your well-rehearsed recommendation, and I'll take it under advisement. The judge looked down at his defendant and slowly shook his frustrated, furrowed scowl. Mr. Verity, Eric, you seem like a perfectly nice young man. As such, I feel compelled to ask you a question that tends to be redundant to the people in your current situation. Mr. Verity, why do I keep seeing you in my courtroom? Because I... Don't answer that, son. In the defendant's chair on the floor beneath the judge's gavel, Eric Verity sat, serenely, in his rumpled corduroy suit, wearing the same satisfied smile he wore the month previous when he was charged with disturbing the peace, and again, previous to that, when he appeared for assault. Mr. Verity, you appear to be two people. You're the subject of these charges and reports, a raucous repeat offender who seems to spend every evening on the streets of our city looking for trouble. You're also the young man who appears before me every few weeks, polite, patient, punctual, and even well-dressed. My question is this. Which of these two are you? I think the details of your file make so little sense to me. Victims in your assault cases all seem to have an endless list of priors of their own, never appear to testify against you. You've been apprehended in warehouses and jewelry stores, but you never appear to be stealing. Your fingerprints are never found on any evidence or merchandise. Well, either there is something you're up to that the entire justice system is missing here, or you just happen to be the unluckiest guy on earth. A minuscule rise in Eric's smile went unnoticed by the judge. I just want to help. To help? What does that mean? Look, Mr. Verity, do yourself and all of us a favor and stop helping. Eric had an inkling that the police officers in his neighborhood resented his interference, though they never acknowledged any such intentions on his part or theirs. They never advanced when he earned charges and arrest on the streets, but they smiled when he sat in the defendant's chair. He suspected that were they to acknowledge what he was trying to do in the spaces and the shadows they weren't patrolling, that his contribution would somehow become real. Well, now you're not getting away scot-free this time, Mr. Verity. I'm sentencing you to 6 months probation and to mandatory psychological consultation. Maybe some therapy will give us some answers. We'll reconvene to check on your progress in 6 months. I had better not see you again before that, young man. This is no place for heroes. The city is a place where inspiration gets buried and eagerly replaced. The city is a place where life subsists amidst the absence of life. Like a motherless child in an incubator, the inhabitants of the city thrive not from the artificial womb that nurtures them, but kind of in spite of it. In the creation of their city, They marvel at the skyline and bask in the architectural wonder of their will, within a cage of their own design and willing capture. The curse of technological advancement is that the convenience becomes the dependence. Those who dwell in the city, who fear it, love it, or hate it, they all depend on it. They depend on 24-hour retail and gridlock traffic, flickering lights, and the frowned expressions of their fellow inmates. Prisoners often develop a feeling of security, learning to depend on the walls around them and time, needing the protection of their enclosure. This is what the city can render. It can make you need it, make you rely on the isolation amidst overcrowding, services that no living being requires, and conditions which no one living was meant to exist. It thrives and it pulsates. It's home. The city had been Eric's home for a decade. He'd grown long ago accustomed to the eyes of strangers and the distant screeches and bursts he couldn't identify. He found comfort in its unnatural light and heat and actions. The city was his home, and he thought it deserved his protection. Patient log entry number 1. Dr. Benjamin Maynard, March 12th. Introductory interview with patient Eric Verity. Eric presents an interesting study. Subject is 28 years old and has no visible abnormalities of any sort. He's a lot more normal looking than I had expected. From the rumors and frustrations floating around the colleagues of mine that have dealt with him or dealt him away, I expected either a disheveled mess or an Adonis figure. Certain memories and facets of his troubled childhood are locked behind his legendary calm. Eric is required to attend therapy as a condition of his probation. He seems quite content with the arrangement. Dr. Julius Harmon's files over the nearly 10 years of their therapy indicate a developmental disorder. Though he is clearly keen in awareness, elementary concepts such as arithmetic, grammar, science, he has a very capable level of focus and concentration, but trouble maintaining a heightened level of conversation. Further sessions will be required to establish a diagnosis and the appropriate therapy method. On a personal note, I find this young man quite personable and intriguing. I look forward to our next meeting. Eric noticed things about the city on his nightly walks that its other dwellers failed to. He noticed every single smile in the city. He sensed them as though they sent a warm breeze in his direction. He saw every door open for a stranger and every seat given up in a restaurant. That warmth became almost addictive to him. He sought it out. By the same unfortunate token, he felt every sneer, every profanity, and every bristly bump shoulder like pins and needles on his neck. Regardless of how the morning sun struck him through his bedroom window and how the first breath of air felt in his lungs or how good he felt he needed to feel, he would walk. Eric would walk until the day or the night felt better. A good day bloomed when Eric found the chance to help somebody. Eric once counted 50 days that went by without anyone speaking to him. After a while, loneliness becomes its own companion. For someone like Eric, living alone is much simpler than coexisting. The moments that most people tend to treasure, when they found recognition or their place in the spotlight, held a different meaning for him. His fondest memories took place as an observer in relative anonymity. In Eric's experience, every time he emerged from the background, the spotlight singed him. Every time he was noticed, it was for being different. There's a strange muscular cramp that accompanies being noticed, and singled out when you're the object of alienation instead of appreciation. People hate you in a way you can't mend when they don't understand you. Being different was the first thing Eric was ever certain about. While other children were learning how to tie their shoelaces, Eric was teaching himself how to blend in. Before he could walk, he taught himself to mimic in order to keep himself camouflaged. When foster parents or child welfare workers spoke of him, they always made the same remarks. They always spoke in that way people do when they know you're present but not among them. They always commented and puzzled over his distant stares and his oddly subdued behavior. Though he looked like other kids, there was something off-putting about him that other people noticed right away. Eric had a certain vacancy in his expression that was undeniable to new people he encountered. His body was incapable of injury. He could never experience the effects of malnutrition, asphyxiation, or exposure, leaving him lacking certain segments of normal instinct of a social animal. Human animal has a deeper purpose in seeking out acceptance, favor, and dominance. The pack mentality ensures shelter, reproduction, and survival. His instincts inherently ignored those requirements. He could never lie or beg or compete because there was never a single facet of his entire structure that sought such validation. Win or lose, he was always going to survive anyway. Not once in his life did Eric try to join in. He knew he didn't belong in the pack. He stood quietly and watched, trying not to be noticed. He observed while others lived and interacted. He smiled when they looked happy, looked down at his feet when they were sad. He did his best to remain overlooked. There were few rewards that could motivate him and fewer punishments that could affect him. He didn't care to see how far he could go before being swiped back in line by his keeper. He didn't challenge for dominance. He always did what he was told. Got up and dressed every morning at the same time because he was told once it was expected of him. His bed was always made, his sheets were always tucked in as tight as a drum, and his room was never messy. He said please and thank you with almost every sentence, and he never spoke until he was spoken to. He made mistakes of etiquette and protocol only once. Programming himself into a robotic reactor kept him safe and anonymous. Independent motive never entered his head until he saw someone he could help. Standing between a victim and danger tends to push you farther from the crowd. People want to forget when you save them. They want to forget the feeling of helplessness that brought you to their aid. On more than one occasion, eyes that once looked up at him with endless gratitude utterly lost their acknowledgement at a later meeting. Hero is perhaps the least transcendent word in our language. The only time Eric almost belonged to something was when he was 8 years old. A few months at his newest foster home, a real friendship had grown between him and Todd, his foster brother of the same age. Eric was along for anything Todd would suggest, which made him the perfect sidekick. As the years passed and they approached adolescence, Todd's social needs were changing. He no longer wanted a playmate. He was beginning to rank the value of his acquaintances based on some superficial, half-adult value system. Eric's witless content and complete ignorance of adolescent social structure made him a liability to Todd. The only consequence in high school is popular opinion. The status that Todd's dashing looks and athletic prowess had quickly garnered him was in potential jeopardy at any moment, but made more precarious thanks to his awkward foster brother. People in his new circle of friends could begin to ask the wrong questions and soon would potentially link them in some way that could have been socially damning. He had to distance himself from his foster hindrance, and quickly. Todd soon resolved that public humiliation was the only answer. Eric, Todd, and his friends all had lockers at the end of the math wing hallway. Despite Eric's presence, it had been established as one of the cool group's hangouts. During the lunch period, the teens would strut, parade, and rank one another. As Todd and his friends would chuckle and flirt with the girls passing by, Eric would enter periodically to grab his lunch or his books. Each of Eric's entrances were intolerable to Todd, constantly feared some sort of reprisal from his unmerciful friends. In an inspirational flash of mean-spirited brilliance, Todd suddenly had a way to both distance his allegiance from Eric and discourage him from making the frequent visits to his hangout. The grape juice box he had still unopened would be the perfect tool. If he could soften the cardboard, it would likely explode on contact when thrown. Oh, great. Here comes Verity. Todd began the scenario by bringing the attention down on Eric himself. Isn't he your foster brother or something, Todd? Go give him a big hug or something. Jacob Williamson was always the first to chime in with a chance at ridicule. Screw off, man. He's just staying at my house. My mom's into charity. After 7 years, Eric's status in the foster home had been assessed and was set as permanent. Todd's mother would have filed for adoption long before, if not for the expensive legal fees. He'll be out soon. They'll probably cart him off to the loser hospital soon enough. Jacob's retort was immediate. Yeah, right, Danver. Who will you have to play dolls with? You'll go to the loser hospital together on a family rate. Oh, yeah? Todd turned up his hand to unveil his softened cardboard juice grenade. Eric could hear Todd's whispering comments as he approached his locker. He could feel the disdain as a small shiver that crept up his back. He kept his head down, pretending to be oblivious as he rolled out the combination on his lock. At the locker directly to his right was Amanda Selkirk. She held a similar nervous stance as any teenage girl would in front of the popular young boys. Eric could hear the growing chuckles from the boys behind him as Todd plotted his assault. The shiver in Eric's spine grew as the moment drew closer. Amanda's locker had a small magnetic vanity mirror that hung on the door beside him. Through its reflection, he could see Todd hand-kneading the juice-filled grenade. As he raised his arm to throw the juice box, Eric noticed Amanda's delicate white blouse. Despite Eric's ignorance of fashion, the shirt looked like something a princess would wear. He could sense how it was important to her. The way new school clothes are vital to teenage girls. He could see in that moment how the grape juice from Todd's practical joke could ruin the shirt, and how the unintentional attack and the humiliation, though fleeting in the long term, would feel devastating to her. He knew what was coming. He easily could have prepared to evade the throw, but he wouldn't. The shiver reached its pitch as Todd's arm drew back and released the box in Eric's direction. He had to shield her. He turned and faced them as the box hurled through the air, his calm expression catching each of the boys off guard. An explosion of purple ruptured across Eric's chest. Amanda still crouched unassuming as the boys as she gathered her books, and then she turned with surprise as the group of boys across the hall suddenly bellowed with laughter. Eric was covered in purple juice. Thanks to his impulse, Todd had achieved a direct hit. The impact occurred directly in the center of his chest, permanently changing the color of his gray sweatshirt. Droplets of grape juice ran down Eric's face as he turned back to gather the rest of his books. Amanda then realized what had transpired and gasped with relief that she wasn't the subject. She looked at Eric's calm expression as laughter raged from behind them. An inkling of what Eric had done for her crept past her eyes. But the storm growing around them was undeniable. The laughter grew in population until it filled the hallway. She stood up, closed her locker, and stepped back into the crowd as the infectious giggle started growing on her own face. She soon laughed with a volume that matched the rest in the hallway. Eric shut his locker and turned to see the mass of faces that bounced and beamed with a barrage that now fueled itself. It was so loud, it was all he could hear. He wiped the droplets off his face with his sleeve and stood in that spot against the wall, uncertain how to react. His eyes remained still as his perplexed expression then found Todd. He could see Todd's new friends congratulating him with pats on the shoulders as their raucous laughter pulled their torsos forward and backward like jack-in-the-boxes rocking on a spring. As the laughter began to subside and the crowd started to disperse, Eric still stood with his back to his locker, his face straight with mild confusion. He was left, still uncertain how he was supposed to react. The bell rang for the next class to commence, and Eric watched as Todd and his 5 friends started off down the hall, still giggling and congratulating one another. "What a loser!" Jacob turned his head back slightly so Eric could hear. Todd's head then turned back in the same way, looking down on him from the corner of his eye. He looked at Eric the way many had looked at him before. The way strangers look at people they don't intend to know. Every time he turned a corner that day, someone was waiting for him with a chuckle that couldn't be confused as friendly. Eric understood their partnership was over on that day. He went back to speaking only when spoken to. He didn't speak much for the remainder of high school. He was still pleased every time he saw Amanda's pretty white blouse. Thank you for listening to part 1 of The Hero Business. If you like this story so far and you want more, or you feel compelled to throw your support in this direction, the fastest route is through my website at patrickhughes.ca. There you'll find access to my other projects, links to my books and ebooks on various platforms, and a contact me function. You can also lend your valuable support by liking and subscribing and sharing on whatever platform it is you're visiting me. It really makes a difference. Please add your voice with a click if you like what you hear. I do hope you share this. Please don't let good fiction stay a secret. Thanks for listening.